Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's program. This is the third module that we are discussing today, and I have called it HR Analytics for Impact. Yesterday, we covered two modules, one of which, the first module was the concept of HR analytics, particularly strategic HR for business partnerships. And in the afternoon, we discussed HR strategy alignment with corporate objectives. So module 3 is a continuation of module 1 and 2, which we delve into detail on the concept of human resource business partner. To start with, HR analytics has become a very important concept in modern day human resource management. This has arisen as a result of the shift from the traditional administrative HR function to a more data-driven decision-making in organizations. This is intended to ensure that there is alignment between HR and business goals to ensure that HR creates impact. This suggests that there is need for HR managers to prove that they can make an impact and a contribution to the organizational success. Similarly, the advancement of technology has necessitated a fresh look at the way HR managers conduct their businesses. Today, technology has evolved, and HR managers must integrate analytics and cloud-based data for purposes of decision-making. In order for the HR managers to make a desired impact, there is need for making decisions and producing results that are measurable. And this can only happen if we base our decisions on tangible data and metrics. Lastly, organizations are in competition. And for HR to contribute to the success of that competition, they have to attract, retain, and develop talent. This requires analytics so that we have a clear understanding of how to manage our human resources. As business partners, we have a responsibility of contributing to the success of the organization. And that success should be measurable. Having said that, I want us to move to the next part, which is the areas we are going to cover this morning. The first area is workforce analytics essentials. What do we mean? This is an introduction to workforce analytics. And by workforce analytics, we are referring to collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data related to the various functions of human resource managers. So what are these functions? One is recruitment and selection. 2, training and development. 3, performance management. 4, reward and compensation. 5, employee relations. And 6 is health and safety. We need to collect data on these initiatives so that we make decisions based on facts as opposed to the traditional intuition. For example, in recruitment and selection, we analyze the process from beginning to the end. Where does that begin? It begins with requisitioning of vacant position. And where does it end? Onboarding. So when we analyze this, we will be collecting data on, one, the time taken to fill that vacant position. That time is data. 2, we analyze the cost of hiring. That cost is data. 3, we analyze the level of satisfaction with this process. That is data. And lastly, we analyze the quality of new hires. That is also data. And we do that for all the other functions. As we shall see, this data helps us to make decisions which are strategic in nature and will demonstrate the contribution of human resource management to the overall attainment of organizational goals and objectives. Secondly, we will be looking at HR dashboards and storytelling. A dashboard is a digital tool that organizations use to collect, analyze, and interpret data. And this can be done in real time. And in these dashboards, we store records related to employees. And these records may relate to aspects like training. How many trainings have employees attended? Or promotions. How many employees have been promoted in the past? Or disciplinary matters. How many disciplinary cases have employees had in the recent past? And therefore, a dashboard is an important tool that will enable us to analyze data for purposes of decision making. And through these dashboards, we can also analyze trends. Hello. As I was saying, that dashboards have become an important element in human resource management because they give us the data that we can use to make decisions. And then storytelling is about what we are doing, how we are doing it, where and when, and the contribution that we are making to the organization. So these are two important areas that we are going to cover this morning. Let us start with the first one, which is workforce analytics essentials. So what is this workforce analytics? By way of definition, workforce analytics refers to the use of data to improve workforce decision making. Use of data. Data is unprocessed information, and we collect this data through interviews, through observations, and through surveys or questionnaires. And when we collect this data, we interpret it so that we can make decisions. This data can be categorized into two: one, quantitative, and two, qualitative. Quantitative data is numerical or mathematical. And then qualitative data is textual, where we are explaining or describing a concept or a situation. So when we talk of workforce analytics, we are referring to data related to recruitment and selection, training and development, performance management, compensation, employee relations, as well as health and safety. All these areas relate to the workforce. For example, in recruitment, we are talking about the number of quality recruits. That is data which we can collect through surveys or interviews or observations. So workforce analytics is the use of data to improve workforce decisions. And why is there a need to improve? It is because organizations face challenges on a regular basis, either arising from internal weaknesses or external changes. And when there are these weaknesses, we need to improve our decision making. For example, we want to recruit new employees, and we have a very short timeline to find a suitable replacement. Using the traditional process of recruitment, it can take a long time. When we do the analytics, a recruitment process may take 45 to 60 days. But with the new technology, we can reduce that time to 30 or 40 days. That is an improvement. And we can only make the decision to automate recruitment if we have data related to the time that is taken to find a suitable replacement. And then what is the purpose of workforce analytics? It is meant to support strategic human resource planning as well as operational performance. Speaking of strategic HR planning, we are referring to the formulation, analysis, implementation, and review of HR strategies in relation to all the functions of HR. For instance, in recruitment, we can formulate a strategy based on workforce analytics. In training, having collected data, we can also make decisions or strategic decisions for purposes of improvement. So workforce analytics helps us to formulate HR strategies. For instance, training. It is a very important function of HR. When we collect data about training, we are likely to look at, one, the completion rate of training programs, or two, the return on investment of the training. If the return on investment is low and the completion rate is very poor, then we can formulate a strategy for purposes of improvement. Where training is not producing results, then we look for other options that can improve the results. For example, on-the-job training methods, such as apprenticeship or simulations, can be changed if they are not delivering the results. On operational performance, we are talking about the processes related to recruitment, training, performance management, as well as discipline. When we have this data, it is easier for HR managers to improve their operational performance in terms of time, in terms of cost, and also in terms of quality. For instance, I have just mentioned that recruitment and selection can be analyzed in terms of time, cost, and the quality of hire. Talking of quality is an operational area where we need to improve the quality of our employees if it is established that the employees we are hired are of low quality. And then what is the scope what are the areas that are covered in workforce analytics? One is recruitment, which I have discussed. Two is retention. Retention is about keeping employees for a long time. And we can analyze the retention rate, where we look at the number of people who are remaining in the organization. You divide that by the average number who are there and multiply that by 100, you will get your retention rate. The flip side of retention is turnover rate, where you calculate the number of employees who have left over the average number of employees remaining, you will get a rate. If the rate is more than 15%, then that is a red flag and action must be taken. Engagement has to do with the emotional and the psychological attachment and the perception of employees on the organization. So from a HR perspective, this requires that we look at motivating factors so that employees identify with and are committed to the organization. How do we know about the level of employee engagement? Again, we can do a survey to give us data on the number of employees who are highly engaged or those who are disengaged. Training, as I have mentioned, that in workforce analytics, we look at the number of people who are completing training programs, and that is the completion rate. Or we look at the cost of training. Or we can also look at the transfer of learning. How many people have been able to transfer what they have learned from the learning center to the workplace? And for people to transfer learning, then they should be able to remember what was taught. And how does that translate into results? And then we talk about return on investment of training. What results are we getting, or what benefits are we getting from training? And we can calculate that by looking at the total benefits over the total cost of the training. Multiply that by 100, you will get the return on investment. Looking at employee productivity, these are the results produced by employees over a period of time. And these results should enable the organization to succeed in the attainment of its objectives. So workforce analytics covers all this, including other aspects like compensation and reward, health and safety, as well as employee relations. And we are going to look at some of this in detail in a short while. And then what is the relevance of understanding workforce analytics? This is to ensure that HR goals are aligned with organizational objectives. As business partners, we must ensure that our organizations achieve their objectives. And we can only do that if we align our HR objectives with organizational objectives. And this analytics will enable us to do exactly that. That if the objective of recruitment is to hire quality employees, And then that should be aligned with organizational objectives of hiring, of providing quality products. So the moment you do not have quality employees, then that has a direct impact on the quality of goods and services that are produced. So that is our understanding of workforce analytics with respect to the functions of HR managers, which are indicated under the scope is recruitment, retention, engagement, training, and employee productivity. What are the tools that we can use in workforce analytics? We can use softwares like Power BI, Tableau, and HR information systems. Most of our organizations use HRIS platforms, this is human resource information systems, to gather, analyze, and interpret data related to recruitment, training, performance management, and other areas. The impact of understanding analytics is that it enhances decision-making, promotes cost efficiency, especially where aspects of finances are involved, and also improving workforce or employee performance. We shall be discussing some of these aspects in detail for purposes of our understanding. Then let us look at the HR analytics metrics, which I've already mentioned. One is the turnover rate. This is the rate at which employees leave or exit the organization. Why are we interested in the turnover rate? It is because it can affect the productivity of the organization. How does this happen? That when employees exit, then there is nobody to do their work, or if there are people, they will be overloaded because their jobs will have to be expanded. Number two, we will be losing our top talent through this turnover. That if our top performers leave, then we have lost talent, which affects organizational performance. And therefore, it is important to measure the turnover rate for purposes of taking corrective measures relating to the factors that may have caused the exits. And how do we calculate this? We look at the total number of exits over a period of time, say a year, and then you divide that by the number of employees who are remaining, then multiply that by 100, then you will have got your turnover rate. For instance, if 10 people left this year, and at the beginning of the year, there were 100 people. So to get the turnover rate, you get 10 over 100 minus 80 divided by 2, you multiply by 100, you will get your turnover rate. And that can be anything between 5 or 10%. That is within acceptable range, because as I indicated earlier, a rate of more than 15% indicates that an organization is not doing very well, because that is a high rate which can affect organizational performance. The second metric is related to recruitment and selection, and that is time to hire. As I indicated, recruitment and selection is a long process which requires time. From the time a position is declared vacant to the time a new employee is onboarded. That takes time. But again, because of the need to find a suitable replacement within a very short time so that we don't affect performance, then we need to measure the time we take to hire new employees. So how do we measure this? You look at the total time taken to hire all the employees. You divide that by the total number of positions filled, and that will give you an average time for each position that was filled. Depending on the industry, the time to hire can vary. In public sector, for example, it can take up to 3 months or even more. In private sector, the story is slightly different because of the flat structures. But in government, there are bureaucracies which require more time. For example, to advertise, you require 21 days. And then for purposes of ensuring ethnic balancing and reflecting the face of Kenya, sometimes advertisements are taken to the remotest villages so that we avoid audit queries. And that will take a longer time in public sector because of the nature of their structures and bureaucracy. But in private sector, it should take less than 60 days, preferably 45 days, so that we can advertise and attract people. But with the new technologies, and therefore technological companies should take a shorter time. The time for hire should be between 30 days and 45 days. That ensures efficiency in our recruitment process so that we do not lose those high quality potential employees. Because if we take a long time to even get feedback to the employees about their applications, probably they will have moved on to other organizations and we shall have lost those high performers. Then another area of measurement is employee productivity, where we are looking at the output of each employee over a period of time. So you look at the results that are produced by each employee, you divide that by the time taken, and then multiply that by 100, you will get your productivity levels. A highly productive employee is one who performs above 85%. And again, depending on your policy, this can vary. For some, it should be 95%. For others, 90, and for others, 85. Why do we need to measure the performance of employee? It is because organizations depend on this output for their success. Any employee is not productive should be put on notice. And that is why in many of our organizations, employees who do not perform probably for 3 consecutive cycles should be put on PIP, Performance Improvement Program or plan. In this period, the employees' performance should be monitored closely and they should be supported adequately so that they can improve their performance. Otherwise, if employees do not perform well even after being put on a PIP, then the next action is to call them to disciplinary to explain why their contract cannot be terminated. We do not want to pay people for not performing. And that is why we need to be careful when it comes to employee productivity. We hired them to work, and if they do not work, then we have to take action. The other area is training, return on investment. That before we undertake a training, we conduct a training needs analysis to identify the people who actually need training. And how do we identify people who need training? We identify their performance gaps. And a performance gap can be indicated by the following. 1, failure to meet targets. 2, wastage of resources such as finance and materials. 3, experiencing difficulties in performing work. And 4 is error rate, producing many errors or wasting materials. At the end of a training program, we should evaluate the effectiveness of the training. That these performance gaps must be bridged. So in training return on investment, we look at the benefits that the employees are bringing as a result of the training. So we look at the total benefits, and then you divide that by the total cost of the training. That will give us a return on investment. If you want to get a rate, you can multiply that by 100. The return reflects the costs and the benefits. How much did you spend on training, and what benefits are you getting after the training? So the benefit should be improved performance in terms of revenue collection, profit making for profit organizations, reduced wastage or cost of wastage, and also reduced time on performing a particular task. Those are returns that we expect to get from training. So we can get data based on the effectiveness of the learning process. Another area of analytics is engagement score. As I said, engagement is the degree to which employees are committed to the organization or identify with the organization or are satisfied with the organization. And we can get this by looking, by giving a survey or a questionnaire to assess the level of engagement. And how do we go about this? We give a questionnaire, which is a tool of data collection, to the employees to give us feedback on their levels of satisfaction with the organization or with aspects of the organization, such as compensation. So how happy are the employees with their compensation? So we look at the total scores of the employees who participated and then divide that by the number of employees. You multiply that by 100, you will get a rating. Total scores. If as the maximum score on compensation is 5, so we get all the total scores of the employees who participated in relation to compensation, how happy they are with their compensation. So if the total scores are 400 of the employees who participated, suppose 30 employees participated. So it is 400 divided by 30, multiply that by 100, you will get the engagement score, total scores. And that will give you an indication of the level of satisfaction of employees with the organization. Why should we be interested in satisfaction? It is because dissatisfied employees are likely to do the following. Number one, perform poorly. Number two, exit the organization. Or number three, absent themselves from work. Poor performance, absenteeism, and exits affect the performance of organization. And that is why we are interested in the engagement scores. Where the engagement score is low, then we should take actions to increase that score. Then lastly is absenteeism rate. That for some reason employees might be absent from the organization, either because they are sick or they look for excuses. We can analyze the absenteeism rate based on medical grounds so that we know how many employees are absent because of illnesses. Probably the illnesses are related to the organizational environment. That is a cost to the organization when people are absent because they have been sick and this sickness is arising from the workplace. That should be addressed. Secondly, we can analyze absenteeism, meaning that people did not report to work and they do not have a valid reason. That can be considered as absconding duty. And therefore disciplinary action can be taken against them. It is expected that employees attend work all the time they are expected to be in the organization. But if employees absent themselves without good excuse, then disciplinary action should be taken. So how do we go about establishing the absenteeism rate? So we look at the total number of days employees have been absent. You divide that by the total days expected. You multiply that by 100, you will get a rating. The total number of days employees are absent. You divide that by the total number of days they are expected to be at work. You multiply by 100 and then you will get your absenteeism rate. If the rate is very high, then again that becomes a red flag and remedial action should be taken, because absenteeism affects performance, and organizations cannot encourage employees to absent themselves from work. Before we take a break for questions or comments, I want us to look at the key components of workforce analytics. One is data collection, that we cannot possibly make any decisions without data. So analytics involves collection of both quantitative and qualitative data. This data is related to all the functions of HR or all the aspects that I've mentioned earlier. If I may project them here. The areas that are covered, that is the scope: recruitment, retention, engagement, training, employee productivity. So we obtain data related to all those areas. What are the methods of collecting data? 1, interviews. 2, questionnaires. 3, observations. And 4, focus groups. This data must have 2 key characteristics. 1, it must be valid. Valid refers to accuracy, that the data must be accurate. For us to arrive at accurate analysis or analytics, then the data must be valid. For example, we want to establish the number of male and female employees in our organizations. That data must be accurate. Why? Because when we want to do, for example, gender mainstreaming, and we have inaccurate data related to gender, then we end up making a wrong decision when it comes to mainstreaming. So the data must be accurate. And secondly, it must be reliable, that the data we collect should be consistent. If our data is not consistent, then there is something wrong either with the language that was used or with the people who filled the survey. For instance, you give a questionnaire to a person and you know him or her to be a man or a woman, and then they tick the opposite. When you look at that feedback, that data is not consistent with what is observable and therefore cannot be reliable. Unreliable data usually arises when people are asked to explain or describe a situation, because everybody will be giving their own opinions. However, we should identify emerging themes from those explanations. For example, we are asking, employees about their level of satisfaction with their pay. And we ask them which aspects of payment should be improved. When we ask them this question, they will list the aspects to be improved. And when we collect all the questionnaires, we will be able to see which are the common aspects of compensation that need improvement. That shows consistency of data, and we can use that to make a decision. The second component is data integration. That we should not collect data from one source only. We can collect data from a number of sources, both from within and outside the organization. From within, we can collect data from the HR department, from finance, from ICT, or from production, for those of us in manufacturing. Outside, we can collect data from other organizations, either by way of comparison, which we call benchmarking, or using consultants who can give us their objective view of what is trending in the market. So for example, in benchmarking, we compare our practices, our policies and systems with those of other organizations in similar industry. For example, in the telecommunication industry, any of the players can benchmark with each other. For example, Safaricom can benchmark with Airtel, and Airtel can benchmark with Safaricom on many aspects because they are in the same industry. For example, compensation. This benchmarking enables us to identify best practices in the industry so that we can formulate strategies to improve our performance. So as a good practice, we should collect data from multiple sources so that we can have a balanced view of what is going on in the organization. Another component is analysis tools. These are methods that we use to analyze and interpret data. And in the majority of cases, and for better understanding, we use visualization platforms such as dashboards, which I will explain in due course. Dashboards can draw or present visuals such as pie charts, bar charts, histograms, or line graphs, which can help us to see clearly the kind of trend that is emerging, or the data that we are interested in. For example, recruitment, we are interested in the time taken to hire, it can visualize that. Or you can use manual tools. Traditionally, we used manual tools where we physically calculate the time, the cost, and other aspects, and then draw visuals or diagrams. This helps us to make interpretation of the data that we have collected. Another component is benchmarking, where we are comparing our results with industry standards. Just like I mentioned, that when you are comparing yourself with others, it must be in the same or similar industry, so that we can identify our weaknesses or even strengths. We can benchmark many things or many aspects related to employment, like recruitment. We can benchmark the practices, the policies, the systems of recruitment. Training, we can benchmark our own training with those of others in the industry. The same with performance and compensation. And this will give us a clear picture of how we compare with other players in the industry so that we can be competitive. For instance, in compensation, there are 3 levels in the industry. 1, above market rate, 2, average market rate, or 3, below market rate. So when we benchmark, we will see where our position is. Are we paying above market rate or average or below? If we are paying below market rate, chances are that our employees might leave for those greener pastures, especially for organizations that are paying above market rate. So this data will help us to make decisions related to compensation so as to retain our employees or improve their performance. The other component is predictive modeling, and one of the types of workforce analytics is predictive. Is another one called prescriptive. Predictive forecasts the future. Prescriptive makes recommendations. So in predictive modeling, we are looking at historical data or what has happened in the past and identify trends which will help us to forecast into the future. For instance, in terms of recruitment and selection, we can analyze the trends. And when we do benchmarking, we will see the industry trends. And what trend are we seeing today? There is adoption of automated tracking system. That many organizations today are automating recruitment and selection. And if that is a trend that is observed, then going forward, most organizations will automate that. And that data will help us to predict what is likely to happen in human resource management. We are likely to automate, and when we automate, there are consequences or there are results that some jobs are likely to be lost. So we prepare for that. Or if not, some skills are going to be required so that people can understand the system. And therefore, we train. That is prediction. And then lastly, reporting. That after conducting this workforce analytics, we report the results. Report the results to who? 1, to the top management who are interested in the performance of the human resource function. 2, to line managers who may be interested in knowing how their respective departments are performing, and 3, to the employees, especially on matters recruitment performance, so that they know what is expected of them. And we can use different tools to report our findings. And the most common tool that is emerging today is dashboards, which I said is a digital tool where we can prepare our reports, post them, and other people can view or access this dashboard. When we are presenting our report to senior management, we prepare executive summaries. These are condensed reports which are highly summarized for the top management. Top managers may not have all the time to read through voluminous reports. What they need is a helicopter view of the results and key recommendations, what action points that they need to take. The details are either for line managers or for the human resource function. So these are the components of workforce analytics. I now want to invite us to make your comments or ask questions based on what we have looked at, starting with understanding of workforce analytics. Secondly, analytics metrics, which are turnover, time to hire, among others, and then the components of workforce analytics. Anybody with a question or a comment to make, please go ahead. In no particular order, Irene, if you can ask your question or make a comment. Miriam, if you are there, please ask your question or make your comment. And lastly, Faith, if you are there, kindly go ahead. Fine, apparently there is no comment or question. I now want us to move to the next part, and that is types of workforce analytics. I've already mentioned one of them. So we are going to look at each one of them in detail. One is the descriptive analytics, where we are explaining a situation as it is. For instance, we give a description of the recruitment and the selection process, or training and development, or performance management, among other areas. So what will we be describing or explaining? We can explain the process of requisitioning vacant positions in recruitment. Or we can describe or explain approval. Who approves? And how long does it take to approve? 3, we can describe advertisements. Where are advertisements placed? Either within or outside the organization. Within it could be public internal notice boards or internal networks or through emails, especially for vacant positions, which employees could be interested to apply for. Or outside the organization, we can give a description of what has already happened. And you can do that even for training. We describe the process of training needs analysis or describe the design of the training programs. How are training programs designed? Ideally, a training program should have the following 6 components. 1, the area of training. 2, the type of training required. 3, the person responsible for training. 4, the trainers. 5, the training budget. And 6, the timeline for training. That framework can be described using words. Like I said earlier, we can use either quantitative or qualitative analysis. And in descriptive analysis, this is qualitative. So we explain what has happened in training, what has happened in performance, what happened in disciplinary procedure, among other areas. Then secondly, we can adopt a diagnostic approach or analytics. And in this case, we put ourselves in the shoes of a doctor. A doctor must diagnose patients to establish what is ailing them. So we identify the problems or weaknesses or strengths in our policies, in our procedures, in our systems related to recruitment, training, performance, and others. For instance, we can do a diagnosis of recruitment and selection procedure so that we can explain why we are doing what we are doing, or identify the challenges and the reasons why the challenges arose. For instance, during interview, we can do a diagnosis. 1, the objectivity of the panelists. 2, the scoring system of the panelists. 3, the qualifications of the panelists. And 4, the recommendations of the panel. And we can explain all this at the end of this process. For instance, if we ended up with a low quality employee, we should go back to the process and find out the reasons why we hired a poor quality employee. So we go to the advertisement. Was the job advertised comprehensive enough to attract the right kind of employee? 2, we diagnose the shortlisting process. How was the shortlisting done? Did we lock out high quality employees or potential employees and ended up with low quality? And then we look at the interviewing and look at the interview panel, their qualifications, the way they scored, their objectivity. And at the end of it, we should be able to establish a reason why we ended up with a poor quality employee. So that diagnosis is very important because it gives us the root causes of a problem. Another type is predictive analytics. Like I mentioned in the earlier slide, can take us back there. Bullet 5, predictive model, where we are taking historical data and then forecasting into the future. For instance, in training, we can identify trends. And one of the emerging trends in training is personalized training. What is this personalized training? That we tailor-make training programs for individual employees. Why do we do that? One, we make them specialists in that particular area. Two, we motivate them because they are learning things they are more interested in. And three, we want to improve their performance or productivity. And that is why we tailor-make programs for individual employees. And that is a trend that is emerging. Therefore, going forward, many organizations are going to embrace or adopt personalized training so that we can improve performance, retain staff, and also motivate them. And we can do that for all the other functions like performance management. In performance management, organizations are now moving away from a self-appraisal to 360-degree appraisal, where as an employee is assessed by a number of people, so that one, we can get data from multiple sources, and two, we get a balanced view of the performance of an employee. And that will help us to make a decision. If many employees who have participated say that employee X is performing poorly, then there is no way that employee can be said to be a good performer. And then we take corrective measures because many people have indicated that that employee is not performing well. So the adoption of 360-degree appraisal is an emerging method that organizations are using, and therefore going forward, or predictably, many organizations will use it. Or using automated systems like performance management system, so that the data we collect is accurate, it is in real time, and that it is reliable. With the use of technology, it is very easy to collect data, analyze, and interpret. And predictably, therefore, organizations are going to adopt performance management systems like some of us have already adopted, like Microsoft 360. Another type of analytic is prescriptive. Just like a doctor prescribes drugs to his or her patients, even in workforce analytics, we prescribe. Prescribe is where we are giving suggestions or recommendations on the way forward. These recommendations must be actionable. An actionable recommendation or prescription is one that has the following components. One, the area of analysis. 2, the gap identified. 3, the recommended action to bridge that gap. 4, the person responsible. 5, the resources required. And 6, the deadline or the timeline. So when we make a suggestion or a recommendation, it should be actionable. Allow me to give an example of recruitment and selection. And the results of our analysis shows that it takes a long time to find suitable replacement. And therefore, we are recommending that we automate the recruitment and the selection process. Then what will be contained in our action plan? 1, the area of analysis, which is recruitment and selection. What is the gap? It is taking a long time to hire. What is the recommendation? Automating the hiring process. Who is the person responsible? The human resource manager and the ICT manager. Because automating is a very high level decision, so it cannot be left to junior staff. It must be the HR manager who knows how the recruitment will work, and the ICT manager because they are the ones to develop the program. And then what are the resources required? We need financial resources, that is a budget, and the computers to ensure that we can track recruitment and selection. What is the timeline? We can give 6 months to automate. But if we have qualified staff who can do that within a shorter time, we recommend a shorter time, like 2 months. So that is a prescriptive analytic where we are making recommendations to improve a current situation or bridge a gap in any of the functions like recruitment, training, performance management, and compensation. Second last is real-time analytics. Like I said, the use of dashboards enable organizations to capture, store, analyze, and share data in real time, meaning that there is no waiting time for managers to collect, analyze, and interpret data. So anytime that something happens, it is posted in the dashboard. And the dashboard does the analytics and it gives us results in real time. For example, today we may have like 6 participants in this training. And a training manager can capture that. This morning we have 6. In the next 1 hour, the number has reduced to 4. We can capture that in the dashboard that the number has reduced. And we can do that for all the days. And that will give real-time analytics of the attendance of participants of a particular training program. Those of us who have a training system, for example, learning management system, you can track the attendance of the trainees in any training program. And that makes it easier to ensure that all the employees attend and that they are acquiring the skills and knowledge, and they can be tested based on what they have learned. So a learning management system can be integrated into our human resource information systems, and this can help us to track our training and development processes. And then lastly is comparative analytics, where we are comparing ourselves either with other departments within the organization or other organizations in the industry. And that is what we have called benchmarking. We compare ourselves with others so that we can identify and borrow best practices. And best practices are those aspects such as policies, processes, and procedures which are working well for others and that can be borrowed so that we can improve our systems, processes, or procedures. And this relates to all the functions or all the areas of analytics or analysis, like recruitment. We can find best practices. We can benchmark what is working for others that is not working for us. We can do the same with training. What are others doing in training that we are not doing? And it's producing results for them. Compensation, we can also do the same, and that becomes a comparative analytic. We compare ourselves. Usually, it is in human nature to compare ourselves with others because nobody is an island. We learn from others, and we can only learn if we can benchmark. So those are the types of workforce analytics which we can use, and this can give us good results and can place us in a good position as business partners because we shall be making informed decisions that are aligned with corporate strategy. Our next part is the process of workforce analytics. That this process, workforce analytics, is not a random process or a random thing that we do. It must be a planned and a systematic process for us to benefit from it. And this process entails 6 steps. The first one is definition of our objectives. Why are we conducting workforce analytics? There are 2 reasons why we conduct that or more. One, to strengthen our processes, our systems, and our policies. Or 2, to improve our systems, processes, and policies. This suggests that there are issues with our systems, policies, and processes. So we need to identify gaps or problems or challenges and then develop objectives around these areas. So what are we addressing in recruitment? What are we addressing in training? What are we addressing in performance? So those are objectives or problem areas that we need to address. And then based on that objective or several objectives that we may have developed, we collect data. Like I said earlier, under the components of workforce analytics, as you can see from that slide, there is data collection, that you cannot conduct workforce analytics unless you collect data. So here, in this process, we collect data related to the various HR functions, like performance, like compensation, employee relations, training, and recruitment. The characteristics of this data are many. One, this data should be accurate, which I called valid. It should measure what it was supposed to measure, accuracy. Secondly, it should be complete. And how do we ensure completeness? That we check the tool that we used. For instance, a questionnaire must be completely filled. Any gaps in the questionnaire will give us gaps in the data that we collect. And therefore, it follows that we will have gaps in our analysis, in our interpretation, and even in our recommendations. So the tools that we use must ensure that data is complete. Otherwise, incomplete data can cause problems when we are doing our interpretation and reporting. Integrity, which I will discuss in the next few minutes, has to do with ensuring that data which is sensitive is not shared with unauthorized persons or is not stored for other purposes or is not copied from other sources. So integrity is about protecting our data from unauthorized access. I will be mentioning in a short while the need for ensuring data protection in compliance with the Data Protection Act of 2019. Otherwise, we have a risk, a big risk, if we gather data and it's accessed by unauthorized people. There are big fines, which I will mention. And then once we have collected data, we analyze it. We can use software tools to analyze this data, such as SPSS or Excel or dashboards. This analysis will help us to uncover any trends, patterns, or correlations. Correlations are relationship between one variable and another. Is there a direct relationship or indirect? And this will help us to make interpretation. So interpretation is now translating raw data into actionable recommendations. For instance, we have collected data about training, and some of the data that we have collected relate to the completion rate of training program, 2, to the cost of training, and 3, return on investment. When we interpret this data, it will give us an indication of what is going on. For instance, the completion rate is low, meaning that many people are not completing their training programs, and yet we have spent a lot of money. That rating will help us to make a recommendation. How do we improve the completion rate of training programs? So that data will make suggestions on what should be done to improve completion rate. And there are many recommendations you can make so that people complete their training programs. And I can make one recommendation, that you make completion rate as a KPI of the employees. That when we do a performance evaluation, we will also look at the completion of certain recommended training programs. If the employees have not completed, then that can be captured and action taken against that employee. That will ensure that all the employees who register for training courses complete the trainings. And that can only be done if we have data that is accurate, that is complete, that is reliable. Then after that is action planning. We find solutions to the problems which we have identified in step 1, or the objectives that we set out to achieve. So we look at the findings or the results of this analytics, and then plan on how to implement. We have made a recommendation in bullet 4 or step 4. Now it is time for us to actualize that recommendation. So in action planning, like I mentioned earlier, you look at 1, the area of analysis. 2, the gap identified. 3, the recommendation. 4, the person responsible for implementing the recommendation. 5, the resources required. 6, the current status. And 7, the deadline or timelines. So in your action planning, you look at all these 7 components so as to make the recommendations actionable. Then lastly is monitoring. That for purposes of continuous improvement, we need to evaluate and measure the implemented recommendations, and where there are gaps, we make adjustments or improvements. In this way, we ensure that we continuously improve our systems, processes, or policies. And this relates to all the areas like recruitment. We monitor recruitment. Like the recommendation I suggested, in recruitment, you automate. In training, you can make completion as a KPI. So we continuously monitor whether this is working, and where there are deviations, we take corrective measures. So that is the process of workforce analytics. And you can do all this or undertake all these steps in relation to all the functions. You remember I mentioned the scope of workforce analytics include recruitment. You go through all this. Training, you go through all this. Performance management, you go through all this. What are the benefits of workforce analytics? Why do we need to do all this? As business partners, we said that we should be seen and actually add value to the organization, value addition. We do not do workforce analytics for fun or for the files or to tick the box. We must derive benefits from undertaking this important exercise. Because we are business partners, we must make a contribution. And because we are business partners, we work with others. When we are working with others or making a contribution, we should demonstrate that our department is adding value. So what is the value that we derive from workforce analytics? One is enhanced decision-making, where we are using data to make informed and timely decisions. Informed and timely decisions. Informed because it is based on tangible data. There is no guesswork. There is no intuition. It is fact. When decisions are based on facts, they are likely to be reliable, they are likely to be credible, and therefore can improve a situation. So we all make decisions related to recruitment, to training, to performance. And when we do this data analytics, we improve our decisions. Secondly is cost optimization. In most of the activities we undertake, there are costs associated with them. Recruitment has a cost. Training has a cost. Performance management has a cost. So all these costs are expenses. Such as ours today, where the economy is not performing, we cannot afford to spend so much on activities like recruitment. So we must optimize costs by reducing our expenses. And as I've indicated, one of the ways of reducing cost is automating routine operations or processes, such as shortlisting. To hire a consultant or take employees from their workstations to shortlist employees, we can automate that. What we need to do is to use AI, feed the criteria for shortlisting into this system, and the system will give us the exact number of employees who qualify and their qualifications. And this can be done within 5 seconds. That reduces the cost of time and also the cost of money that could have been spent hiring a consultant, especially those hiring agencies. In this way, we are able to reduce expenses. And we can only arrive at this decision when we have data to support that decision. And that data is workforce analytics. And we can do that for training. Remember, I mentioned that training must calculate the cost of training per employee. So we look at the total expenses for expense for training. You divide that by the total number of trainees. So you will get the total cost per trainee. And that will give us how much we are spending on a particular employee, or how much we are spending on our training as a ratio of the total revenue of the organization. If it is very expensive, we reduce that cost. And how do we reduce that cost? We can do internal training instead of hiring experts. Or even if we have to hire experts, then we do bidding and select those experts whose bids are lower. Another benefit is talent retention, where we are looking at data related to turnover. And turnover can be attributed to a number of factors, such as working conditions, payment, relationships within the organization, or even promotion. So all these factors will give us an indication of the reasons why employees are leaving. And with this data, we are able to formulate strategies so as to retain our employees. Another benefit is performance improvement, where we are looking at performance at 3 levels. 1, at the individual employee level, 2, at the departmental level, and 3, at the organizational level. So with the data, we can identify or uncover factors affecting individual, departmental, or organizational performance. At the individual level, we can find factors like lack of tools. If an employee does not have tools and it is established through these analytics, then we provide the tools. If it is non-alignment between the employee qualifications and the job they are doing, that is job incongruence, it means that a person was allocated the wrong job for which they didn't qualify. So how do we improve this? It is by redeploying that employee. And if redeployment is not possible, then we train. But training can only come as a result of lack of skills and knowledge. And this improvement can only be uncovered through workforce analytics. Succession planning is another benefit that we get from workforce analytics. In succession planning, we want to identify potential managers or potential employees who are eligible for promotion. And when they are promoted, it means that they are taking over from those who leave, and therefore they succeed those who exit the organization. And how then do we identify people with potential? We conduct a workforce analytics. And this analytics will revolve around the following. 1, the skills and the knowledge the employees have. 2, the performance levels of the employees. And 3, the competencies of the employees. Allow me to talk about competencies in relation to succession planning. Competencies are abilities of an employee to perform work effectively, abilities. And there are about 5 types of abilities. 1, core competencies. 2, functional competencies. 3, technical competencies. 4, behavioral competencies. And lastly, excuse me, lastly is leadership competencies. So when we are doing this analytics, we look at the competencies of these employees so that we identify specific employees who can be promoted. And these are the ones that we will include in our succession planning. Secondly, in succession planning, we have to identify the core roles that have to be performed, so that as we prepare people for promotion, there are core roles they are going to perform. So again, we need to do an analytics to identify those core roles to which employees will be promoted. So workforce analytics is very key because it gives us data on the eligible employees who can be considered for succession planning. Succession planning does not only focus on the individual employees, it also focuses on the job descriptions, on the organizational structures and the roles to be played, and also the resources required for succession planning. Then lastly, but not least, is competitive advantage. That when we analyze all the functions of HR, from recruitment to health and safety, we get data. That data is analyzed, is interpreted, and gaps identified. Those gaps can be bridged through recommendations. So in workforce analysis, we make recommendations for improvement. And these recommendations revolve around all the areas of analysis like training, performance, and the rest. Once we make these recommendations in all these areas, we make improvement. And these improvements will make our organizations to be competitive. Competitive in terms of staff attraction, competitive in terms of staff development, competitive in terms of staff retention. So once we are competitive in all these areas, then we are said to be having a competitive advantage. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the benefits of workforce analytics. Before we take another break, let's look at the challenges in workforce analytics. On top of the list is data privacy. I mentioned earlier that we collect data, and a lot of it, during workforce analytics, and some of the data we collect is confidential. Sensitive and confidential data must be protected in compliance with the Data Protection Act. If there is any data to be shared, especially when we are reporting, it should be with the consent of the data owners. And who are the data owners? It is the employees. The employees must give consent when we are sharing data with any third parties. So it becomes a challenge if people can access this data and they are not authorized. And for that reason, we need to protect this data by putting in place systems that will limit or prevent access. How do we do this? One, we limit access. So we give limited authorization to access data. Only people who are authorized can access data. Two, we can put in place firewalls. These are systems that can prevent outsiders from hacking into our systems. Three, we can use antiviruses so that our data cannot be corrupted. Three, or four, we can train people on how to protect data. Because there are people out there who are waiting for us to make mistakes. And without training, we make mistakes. So we must ensure data privacy. What are the consequences of not protecting our data? One, it can be stolen by our competitors, and they know what we do and can beat us in our game. Two, it can be corrupted or lost. Corrupted data means that you can no longer use it. You can imagine the amount of time, energy, and money that has been spent in collecting data. And then within a second, it is corrupted. We need to protect this data. Three, it can be costly in terms of three things. One, court cases or lawsuits. Employees whose data have been breached can go to court and sue the organization for compensation. Lawsuits are expensive because of the time taken for managers to attend court cases, and in terms of cost, because we have to pay our lawyers to go to court. If you don't have an internal lawyer, you have to hire an external one, and you have to pay them. It's expensive. Secondly, there are fines. For example, under the Data Protection Act, the Office of the Data Protection Commission has a right to impose fines on organizations that breach data privacy. And these fines may range from 3 to 5 million, depending on who has committed the offense. At the organizational level, the Data Protection Act says that you can be fined up to 5 million or 1% of your total revenue. That is expensive. An individual who commits an offense can be fined up to 3 million. And that is why we need to protect this data at all costs, because of the attendant consequences like lawsuits, fines, and penalties. Secondly is resistance to change. When we conduct workforce analysis in areas like recruitment, training, performance, management, and others, we make recommendations. Those recommendations may imply changing policies, changing systems, changing processes, and changing procedures. For instance, after workforce analytics, on recruitment and selection or training, we recommend automation of these processes. That is a change from the traditional way of doing things. You are automating. So when you automate, employees can resist. Why? Because one, they may not have the skills and the knowledge of using the new system. Or two, they may resist because their jobs may be gone. That when you automate a process, jobs may be lost. And that is the reason why they can resist change. So as a recommendation, in order to avoid resistance, one, you can do a debriefing. Explain to the employees of the impending change. Two, involve them in decision making. That when we are thinking of implementing such a system, let them be involved. 3, we consult. We get ideas on how we can improve these recruitment and selection procedures so that they own this process. And 3, or rather 4, we can train people so that they are able to navigate the changes that are being recommended. So resistance to change is a challenge, and we can avoid this resistance by involving employees, by debriefing them, by consulting them, and by training them. Then skill gaps. This is where employees do not have the relevant skills to conduct the workforce analytics or analysis. Not everybody can do an analysis unless you have analytical skills. There are some of us who may not be able to analyze, for example, performance management from a mathematical perspective. So that becomes a gap, and where there are many of such skill gaps, we may have to hire an external consultant, and again, this can be expensive. Data silos, where each department keeps its own data, meaning that data is not integrated and the people cannot access data across functions. This becomes a limiting factor because we can only use data that is available to us. If data is siloed, like HR has its own set of data, finance has its own, other departments have their own sets of data, we may not know what is going on in those other departments. So to break these silos, we need to have a conversation with all the managers and integrate all the data related to employment. If it's recruitment, we can access them using one central system. If it is training, we can access. If it is performance, we can always access through a centralized system. And this can be done by automating systems, for example, using human resource information systems or ERPs. And this can be stored in the cloud. Like I said, that data analytics, after conducting this analytics, we can store this data in our cloud system and can be accessed from any corner of the world when there is a need. Another challenge is the cost of implementation. In terms of cost, we are looking at 2 types. 1, the time, and 2, the money. For instance, if we are to automate learning and development, we need to buy the system or develop the system. If we have to buy the system, we look for vendors, either within the country or outside, depending on our need. So that becomes expensive for the organization, and that is costly. If we have to develop our own system, then we'll need to have system developers or software developers. And unless we have these software developers, we also need to get these developers from outside. And again, it's expensive to get software developers. Those of us who have interacted with system development, I believe know what it takes to develop a new software that will be used in various functions like recruitment, training, performance management, reward, and others. A case in point is the one that is being used by SHA, which cost 104 billion shillings. It's a software. It's not a machine. So such softwares can be very expensive depending on the usage. I want to believe that in our organizations, you don't have to spend colossal sums of money to implement a system. And lastly is interpretation errors, where after conducting a workforce analysis, we do not interpret the data correctly. And this leads to poor decisions or wrong HR strategic decisions. Like I said, the data that we collect must be accurate and must be reliable. If it's not accurate, it is not complete, it is not reliable, then interpretation becomes a challenge. And therefore, if we have to overcome this challenge, we need to train our people on data analytics. I want to open the floor to all of us to ask questions, make comments on what we have discussed. That is, the process of workforce analytics, 2, benefits of workforce analytics, and the 3 challenges in workforce analysis. Anybody with a question or a comment to make, please go ahead. The floor is ours. Please ask your question or make your comment. Sharon, if you are there, please ask your question or make your comment. Ruth Mora, any question or comment that you may have? And lastly, Terry. Terry, if you are there, please make your comment or ask your question.
I wanted to ask if we can get the notes.
Sorry, come up again. I didn't hear you well.
The presentation. Yes,
you will get these notes on our website upon successful completion of this program.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other question or comment that any one of us may have? Okay. Let us look at the future of HR analytics before we go to the second part of our program this morning. That the future of workforce analytics is more of predictive. That for us to be proactive as HR managers, we need to identify trends that are taking place in our space and then predict possible future situations, conditions, or outcomes. And therefore, our focus should be more on predictive analytics as compared to descriptive analytics. Predictive or descriptive. If I may go back to what we covered earlier about the types of analytics, here they are: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, real-time, and comparative. So the future of HR analytics is more on predictive. we can identify trends so that we can be proactive in our decision. Number two is the adoption of AI in all our functions. For example, in recruitment, we can use AI to shortlist candidates or even interview candidates. There are enough examples around us of organizations that have used AI to interview their candidates. This AI asks questions just like human beings can ask questions and makes a selection just like a panel can do a selection. Only that what is lost in this is the human touch, where there are no feelings, because AI has no feelings compared to the traditional interviews that we undertake during recruitment. So AI is going to be used in many of our functions, including training, performance management, compensation, discipline, and others. It may take some time, but that is something that we should consider in the near future. Thirdly is employee experience, that we are no longer talking about employee satisfaction. We want to talk about employee experience. What is it that they feel? How do they perceive the organization? And therefore, through these analytics, we are going to identify what the employees like, what makes them happy, so that we can enhance their experience. And this can be done through analytics. For example, wellness programs. What are these wellness programs? For example, sports grounds for people to be healthy, physically healthy, and even mentally. That if we conduct HR analytics and we get a recommendation from employees that they need sports facilities like gyms or football clubs, they can join, so that an employee doesn't have to pay in a private gym to do exercises. And that can enhance employee experience. Another future trend is real-time insights. I said that dashboards enable us to collect, analyze, and interpret data in real time. The waiting time is very short, and because of the need of HR managers to adapt quickly to the changes in the environment, we need real-time insights. And that data analytics enables us to be agile. Agile in the way we make decisions, in the way we formulate strategies, and even in the way we collect, analyze, and interpret data. So real time is the way to go. And today organizations are now using smartphones, especially in project organizations, to monitor what the employees are doing in real time. These smart technologies can locate employees to a meter where they are, so they can tell where the employees are and what they are doing. So real-time insights can help us make better decisions going forward. Another aspect is strategic influence. As we said earlier, human resource business partners contribute to the attainment of corporate strategy. And we can only do that if we can have a linkage between HR strategy and corporate strategy. We can formulate strategies based on data related to recruitment. What strategy do we adopt? Training, what strategy do we adopt? Performance management, what strategy? Compensation, what strategy? And this strategy is informed by data. So in HR analytics, we collect data, we use this data to interpret and make recommendations. Those recommendations are strategies related to human resource management. And this must be aligned with the corporate strategy. For instance, if the corporate strategy of the organization is to automate operations by the year 2027. So in recruitment, we automate. In training, we automate. In performance management, we automate. And that is how we can find a link between HR strategy and corporate strategy. And that is how we play our role as strategic partners in human resource management. Lastly is continuous improvement. Our environment is dynamic, meaning that it is in a continuous state of change. And therefore, organizations that survive are those that are adaptable to this change. We can adapt because we do analytics all the time. When there are changes, we can do analytics in real time and incorporate those changes into our systems of recruitment, training, performance. And therefore, analytics is an iterative process, which means that we make small but progressive improvements on HR policies, HR systems, HR processes, and HR procedures related to our functions. So that is how the future looks like when it comes to HR analytics. So it should be predictive, integrating AI, focusing on employee experience, should be real time, should be strategic in approach, and continuous improvement. Part 2 is HR dashboards and storytelling. We have said that a dashboard is a digital tool where we can collect, store, and share data within and outside the organization in real time. Collect, store, share data in real time. And for us to play our role as HR partners with others, like line managers, employees, and senior management, we should make our decisions in real time. So there's no waiting time. For example, if you go to our dashboard, you see changes that are taking place in recruitment, changes in performance, changes in discipline, and others. So that dashboard plays a key role in providing us with real-time data, and we can make decisions in real time. Then on the part of storytelling, that as HR managers, we have our story to tell. Either our story of success or our story of failure using data. So we can tell our story about recruitment, our story about training, our story about employee relations, our story about compensation, our story about employee engagement. Who do we tell our stories? We tell stories to our stakeholders. The most important stakeholder is the senior management. The second stakeholder is line managers. The third stakeholder is the employees that we have. Why do we tell stories to these people? It is because they are our partners and we need to work together. They need to understand what we are doing as HR managers in a persuasive way. And how can we persuade people? It's by presenting our story using data. And this is how we can go about it. So what do we understand by HR dashboard? It's a visual tool, like I said, displaying HR data in real time, as well as metrics and performance indicators. HR data relates to all the information related to employees. Metrics are measurements related either to employee performance, to recruitment and selection, to performance management and others. And then KPIs, we can always get key performance indicators using this dashboard. It is a digital tool that displays data visually using pie charts, bar charts, histograms, and other visual presentations. What is the purpose of using dashboards? It is basically to summarize data, especially for our leaders and the decision makers. Like I said earlier, that when we are making reports or when we are reporting our findings, we should have different versions of our report. There is the long version, which can be shared with fellow managers. And then there is the short version, which can be shared with top managers. So the short version is the summarized form, which can be obtained through dashboards. So the dashboard summarizes key findings and recommendations using visuals. The design, it combines charts, graphs, and KPIs. If you look at bullet 1, it talks about charts, graphs, and KPIs. Charts can be like bar chart or pie chart. For instance, you want to present data on gender balance in our organizations. So in the bar chart, we can present different genders and show the percentages in that bar chart. Or use a pie chart showing male and female employees and their numbers. Graphs, it could be a line graph. Line graphs usually show trends or changes in time, and therefore this type of data is called continuous data. For example, if I may use a rudimentary case, rainfall patterns from January to October. You can draw a line graph from January to October. Why? Because this data is continuous. We rarely use line graphs in human resource data because most of the data is not continuous. But that does not mean that we cannot use graphs, especially when it comes to individual employee performance. We can develop a graph showing the performance of an employee in January this year. in February, in March up to October using a line graph. And that will show a trend. How is the employee performing? You may see a sharp improvement in the performance of an employee in a certain month. That will trigger a question. Why did this performance improve so exponentially compared to other months? And then you can go back to the targets that were set or the support that the employee got to register such kind of big improvement. And then KPIs, these are key performance indicators shown in the dashboard. What is the function of a dashboard? Is to provide real-time data showing changes in recruitment, in performance management, in training, and other areas, so that we can always track outcomes. The focus is mainly on the areas of analysis like recruitment, training, performance management, turnover, and employee engagement. Lastly, what is the outcome of HR dashboards? It is to ensure transparency and the data-driven decision-making. Transparency because everything is displayed in these dashboards and authorized people can access. Unlike when we have manual systems where we keep our data, it is difficult to access. It is time consuming. So the use of dashboards reduces time. It is convenient, it is transparent, and it is accurate. What are the key elements of effective dashboards? If dashboards are systems or digital tools, what should tell us that they are functioning effectively? One is relevance, that whatever data that is captured in this dashboard is usable or helps to satisfy an objective. And that satisfaction is either to support a strategic move or achieve an operational objective. So all the data that we store or input into dashboards should be relevant. Secondly, simplicity. We should avoid jargon language which cannot easily be understood by our partners. And the partners are our employees, are our line managers, are our senior managers. Visual appeal, we say that dashboards present visuals. Visuals are graphs. Visuals are charts. So how do we make these charts and graphs appealing? We use colors, for example. You can use a color red or green or yellow, depending on what we want to project. Color red could be an indicator of a red flag. Color green could indicate attainment of the KPIs. Amber could indicate danger or average performance, which can either be growing to poor performance or good performance. So the use of colors help to attract the eye and appeal to the users. The icons must be clearly seen and identified, that if you click an icon, you know what you are clicking. If it's training, there's an icon on training. And within training, there are other icons that you can click, like training programs. Within training programs, you can click the number of trainees in that training program. Within that program, you can click the number of trainings that have been completed. So this is a system that is configured in a way that we can click on those icons and display information or data that we are looking for. Accuracy, I've said that data must be accurate so that we make accurate decisions. Customization, the dashboard that is used in finance or in ICT could be different because of the nature of their work. In HR, we need to customize our data to reflect recruitment, training, performance management, reward management, employee relations. So if we click on any of this, we are able to see what is going on. And lastly is interactivity, that this dashboard is able to interact with the employees, or employees are able to interact with it. That at the click of a button, you are able to see a display of information. And at the click of another button, you see more details. And this can go deep or drilled down for other information that we are looking for. How do we create an effective HR dashboard? One is by clearly defining our objectives of using the dashboard. What questions are we answering in relation to recruitment, to training, performance management, and others? Secondly, we select metrics. What are these measurements we are going to use in order to develop those graphs? So those metrics are measurements which could be quantitative, and this can be helpful in designing the dashboard. Data integration, that we can obtain data from different sources so that we have a clear and full picture of what is going on within the HR component. Again, visualization, I've talked about it, the use of colors, the use of charts, the use of graphs, which are well laid out for easy understanding. Accessibility, we ensure that only authorized people can access, and the levels of access can be determined. However, the access should be easier. We should not make the dashboard so complicated that it becomes difficult for people to obtain information. And lastly, the dashboard should be updated frequently so that we allow new data to be integrated into the system. What are the metrics that can be projected or used in the dashboards? Again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, the types of analytics. Turnover rate, that's the number of people who are leaving the organization. Time to hire, it measures the efficiency of recruitment process. Employee productivity, it measures the output of employees over time. Return on investment of training measures the effectiveness of training, especially the benefits derived from training. Engagement score shows the level of satisfaction of employees. If we have conducted an employment satisfaction survey, it should be put in this dashboard and we can get this engagement score. For absenteeism, I mentioned it, that it tracks the rate of absence from work, and it can tell us how many employees were absent in January, in February, up to October. and that can give us a trend on the rate of absenteeism. What are the benefits of using HR dashboards? I've mentioned some of them. For example, real-time insight, that these dashboards stores information in real time, and we can retrieve data in real time. We can store data in real time. So the waiting time is small and therefore becomes a very good tool that can assist us in making decisions very fast. And that is why we ask our HR managers to be agile in the way they think, because we mentioned that HR partners need to have an agile mindset. So through dashboards, which gives us real-time insights, we are able to be agile. Another one is data visualization. For those of us who cannot interact accurately with printed words, we can interact with charts, graphs, and tables, which makes our work easier. We can conceptualize very easily data that is presented in visuals. The other one is performance monitoring, that we are able to measure performance of all the employees, wherever they are. Probably some of our organizations allow our employees to rate themselves on a daily basis using this dashboard. So you can rate yourself on a daily basis, saying, today, my objectives were 1, 2, 3. My KPIs were this, and 3 objectives have been achieved, 4 KPIs have been attained, and this system can rate you on a daily basis, so that at the individual level, you are able to track your performance. And it also helps to support decision-making, because HR dashboards have the data that we are looking for, data related to recruitment, to training, to performance management. So based on this data, we can make decisions, and very quick decisions. Transparency, because there's nothing hidden here. Everything can be accessed. So there is no excuse that I didn't know. Dashboards therefore enable us to be transparent. And lastly, efficiency. Efficiency has to do with the utilization of time and resources. Through the adoption of dashboards, we save on time, and we also save on cost. The cost, for example, of appraising people. People can appraise themselves and put their results on this dashboard. It doesn't have to take a week. It can take a click of a button. And then our second last part is the storytelling. How do we tell stories with data? And by way of definition, storytelling is turning data into compelling and persuasive narratives. We have collected data related to recruitment, performance, and others. Performance and others, sorry for that. This data should be used to convince or persuade other partners to buy into our strategies or change the strategy. So when we are telling stories, we are using data to persuade our partners. Remember, our program is human resource business partner. We must persuade our partners through storytelling using data. Secondly, what's the purpose? The purpose of storytelling is to ensure that our partners understand what we are doing in human resource management. So this data helps the partners to understand what is going on in recruitment, in training, in performance, in compensation, in health and safety, in employee engagement. Then what is the structure of the storytelling? You can combine facts, visuals, and business context for impact. Remember, we said that today we are going to look at data analytics for impact. So storytelling can be impactful if it's structured in a way that persuades them or convinces the partners that what we are doing is the right thing and should be supported. Engagement, that if you are a good teller, a good storyteller, you can create an emotional connection with the participants. And the participants here are our partners. So that emotional connection can be achieved through storytelling. And therefore, the language that you use, the structure of your storytelling, and the visuals that you use will evoke those emotions so that people understand what is going on. Again, what is the relevance of storytelling? Is to tailor-make stories to suit the needs of each audience or partner. There are many audiences like executives, top managers, 2 line managers, and 3 HR teams. So we can tailor-make the story. For executives, the story they want to hear is about data, is about cost, is about improvement. For line managers, it is the story about process, story about procedure. For teams, they want to hear the story about performance improvement. They want to hear the story about payment and the story about training. So we tailor-make our stories to suit different audiences. And what is the outcome of storytelling? We ensure that the recommendations that we make are actionable. And actionable in the sense that we persuade people, they agree with us, and therefore we develop an action plan consisting of the areas of improvement, the persons responsible, if they have the buy-in, because we have told them the story, they will buy in, they will take responsibility, and then the resources to be allocated, the partners will allocate the resources where necessary. What are the techniques of storytelling? We can use any of this, like data visualization using the dashboards, narrative flow where we have textual insights to tell our stories. And this narrative should be structured in a way that there is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is an end. So you have an introduction, you have the body, you have the conclusion and recommendations. And then contextualization is where you are discussing the findings in the context of the business. That in any of the businesses that you operate in, we are talking about context in terms of recruitment. What is the context? Training, what is the context? So that you explain facts as they are based on your analytics, and they are contextualized. That currently our situation is this in recruitment and selection. After our analytics, we are making a recommendation to improve recruitment and selection. So this contextualization makes our partners see exactly what is going on and are able to relate our findings with what is going on. The other one is the comparison. technique where we are using benchmarks where necessary by way of comparing ourselves with other people in the best of class. These are other organizations that have done very well in the various areas, and that can be used as a way of improving our systems. The other way is simplicity, that we tell our story in a very simple but insightful way. We do not want to overwhelm our audience with jargon. When we are simple in our presentations, it is easier for people to understand and also buy in to what we are saying. And lastly is call to action, that when you conclude your story, do not leave it hanging. Call people to take action. In recruitment, what action do you want them to do? To take, sorry. In training, what action do you recommend? In performance management, what action is required? And call all of them to take part in these actions so that together we improve. And that is why we are calling for partnership. This call for action, we are asking people to partner with us so that we can improve the human resource function. What is the purpose of storytelling before we close? One is to humanize data. By telling a story, you are making the hard facts relatable to human emotions and human understanding. Secondly is to ensure clarity, that data can be complex, but when somebody explains it in a simple language, the partners are able to understand. Engagement is where we are bringing people together so that they can support what we are doing as HR partners. So we must capture the attention of all the partners by creating attention on what we are saying. That connection helps us to engage, and this engagement helps us to acquire insights or obtain insights from others by way of contributions. Another purpose is to influence decisions of our partners, decisions related to strategy, to resource allocation, to time commitments. If our story is compelling, your story is persuasive, then we can influence other partners to agree with us or support us. Again, the purpose of storytelling is to ensure that we make impactful decisions. If I may take us back to what we mentioned earlier, the last point, calling to action. That when we call people to action, we are asking them to support us in recruitment, in training, in performance, and other areas. And that story that we have told will prioritize the areas of impact, and we implement the recommendations where we are going to get the greatest impact. And lastly is retention. We retain the attention of the audience. And this audience is not just any other person. Emphasis is put on partners. The audience is our partner, the people we work with. So we capture the attention of the audience through storytelling. And we tell these stories through data, and the reports that we present enable the partners to be convinced that indeed HR is adding value to our organization. The second last thing is, how do we link dashboards to storytelling? One, we use those metrics in data to tell our story. So if we get data on recruitment, we tell a story about recruitment. The same data on training, we tell that story through storytelling. And that can only be done if we understand the data, if we can interpret the data in a meaningful way, and then we create a story from it. Secondly, we highlight insights because the dashboard gives us the metrics, the data, and the KPIs. So we highlight those insights related to recruitment, training, performance, in terms of trends. What's the trend in recruitment? What is the trend in performance management? What is the trend in compensation? So we can highlight those trends so that we can persuade our partners that if we don't change or move with the trends, then we cannot be competitive. Or we look at gaps. What are the gaps in all the areas of data analytics? That is recruitment, training. What are the gaps? So through storytelling, we are able to demonstrate the gaps and persuade our partners on the way forward in terms of recommendations. Thirdly, stakeholder focus, that the dashboard has given us the data. That data should be relatable to the stakeholders, and that is our partners. So the stories must be tailored, as I mentioned earlier, depending on the needs. If it's the HR team, what is it that they are looking for? If it is the line managers, what is it that they will look for in these dashboards? And if it's the top management, what will they require? Another one is actionable insights, that we should be able to conclude with clear recommendations involving the areas that were analyzed, the gaps that were identified, the recommended actions, the people responsible, the current status, as well as the timelines. Second last is the emotional connection. Like I said earlier in the preceding slide, that we are able to connect. Look at bullet 3, engage, capture leaders' attention. And therefore, when we are using dashboards and storytelling, we are able to emotionally connect with our partners. And that emotional connection helps us to persuade them to agree with us so that they can allocate resources or support. Visual consistency, I said that the use of colors, let them be consistent. The use of icons, let them be consistent, so that we have a structured way of presenting dashboards as well as telling our stories as it is. Lastly, what are the benefits of HR dashboard and storytelling? We make informed decisions based on data to ensure transparency. As I mentioned earlier, dashboards enable us to present data in a transparent way. And using this data, we can tell a story transparently. Efficiency is about reduction of cost and time in performing certain functions. So dashboards can help us to reduce reporting time and also cut on cost of collecting, analyzing, and storing data. It's also a collaborative tool where people can log into the dashboard and access information. And all departments can access information in the dashboard. And when you are telling your story, you can always demonstrate using the dashboard that, look, here is our dashboard. This is what it contains. And you can access it anytime from anywhere. So that's a collaborative tool where people from different departments can access data in real time. The strategic impact that through dashboards, we have said, we collect data, we analyze data, interpret that data. And this helps us to make strategic decisions. And that is the value addition that HR has to give when it comes to human resource business partnering. And lastly is the culture shift. We need to have a mindset of data-driven decision-making. That without data, we will be relying on hearsay or human intuition, which is not accurate. So when we make decisions based on data, then we create a culture where decisions are fact-based, fact. The challenges in dashboard and storytelling, one is the quality of data, which can be inaccurate, inconsistent, or incomplete. Complexity, that the data can be overly complex and therefore becomes difficult. And I mentioned earlier, do not complicate things. A good dashboard is one that is simple to understand. Skill gaps, I said that dashboard design may face the challenge of skill gaps where the designers do not have the right skills or even the analysis, the people to do the analysis cannot do that. We need people who are skilled, knowledgeable, and experienced to design the dashboards and also to tell the stories in a convincing or persuasive manner. Resistance is another challenge we mentioned earlier, that using data analytics, certain recommendations can be made which imply change. And the people resist change because they were not involved or they do not see any relevance. Overemphasis on numbers, not many of us can relate with numbers or statistics. We need to break that down through storytelling so that it reduces the people to be overwhelmed. Then we need to update our dashboards so that our storytelling can always be relevant, can always be up to date. What is the future of dashboard and storytelling? As I said, we need to integrate AI, that as we tell our stories, we have artificial intelligence, which we can use. For example, the use of ChatGPT or DeepSeek, which are examples of AI, and you call them softwares that are designed to help us make decisions. Predictive analytics, we said again, we focused into the future, we are proactive people. Personalization of dashboards, depending on the needs, and these are our partners. Managers, leaders, HR teams have different needs. That's why we have to tailor-make our dashboards so that we enable each of our partners to have access to the dashboards. Visualization, dashboards use visuals like charts, graphs, and tables for ease of understanding. Continuous storytelling, let us not stop telling our stories the way we know how. tell the story about recruitment. They tell the story about training using data. And lastly, we cannot become business partners unless we are able to influence strategy. We use data to influence strategic decisions. On that note, we come to the end of our presentation this morning, and I will now invite us to make our comments or ask questions related to what we started this morning on HR analytics for impact. So anybody with a question or a comment, please go ahead before we close. Anybody with a question or comment?
Yes, I do.
Yes, Terry, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for the very detailed presentation.
Yeah.
And very informative. You have mentioned that a good dashboard is one that is simple.
Yes.
Yes. Would you have like a sample template that we can use? Because I have seen, or we can make reference to, I've seen dashboards that are very complex. Others just lose the users lose it all. They're not able to track. Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's also the challenge of having BAUs in the dashboard. Is it wrong, first of all, to have BAUs in the dashboard? Because at some level, like at the operating level, really most of what would be in the dashboard, my understanding or my assumption would be BAUs. Yeah, kindly.
By PA, you mean personal assistant?
Oh, no. Business as usual. You know, those tasks that are just day-to-day, normal, not really strategic. Yeah.
Yeah, let me start with the first. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, because I've heard of our colleagues advising their team members to strike off some tasks or strike off some things, yet that is at their level, that is the only thing they can do. They're not at decision-making point, so I'm left in the middle wondering, is this fair? Is this not? Is the expectation matching the office? Yeah, kindly. Yes, thank you.
All right. Quick one. One, about the simplicity of the dashboard. I can give a template in the afternoon when we meet. I believe you will be there. Give a template because I cannot demonstrate it here, so that you can see what should an ideal dashboard look like, so that everybody in the organization is able to relate. In terms of complexity, again, we have said in the design of the dashboard and the storytelling that we tailor-make the language to suit the intended users or partners. We tailor-make a dashboard for senior management, and therefore the language used would be tailored for senior management. For line managers, we tailor-make the language in the dashboard so that they are able to relate. And then coming to relevant content, that goes to the design. We said that designing a dashboard requires a collaboration between HR, line managers, and even employees. And that is why we need to involve them in its design. From your explanation, it appears that you have challenges having content that is not value adding to the organization. And therefore, people find it business as usual, that we have a dashboard and therefore we tick the box. For us to play our role as business partners and contribute effectively to corporate strategy, whatever is contained in the dashboard should assist in making strategic decisions. So if it's an aspect related to recruitment and selection, which kind of data do we have? Training, which kind of data do we have? And therefore that calls for a review of your dashboard, if you have any, so that you make it, one, user-friendly, two, relevant for use, and three, contribute to strategic decisions, so that we do not have clutter or unnecessary information in our dashboards that may not add any meaningful value. Terry?
Yes, I hear you.
Thank you. So anybody
Yeah.
else with a question so that we can close?
Your afternoon session is at 2, right?
Yes, our afternoon session is at 2 to 5. Yes.
Or 2 to 5.
Yes.
Okay, I might need to reach out to you privately because I have an engagement at that time.
Okay. So if there is no further question, I want to thank you very much for your participation, for listening. I look forward to seeing you again in the afternoon for another insightful session. Bye for now.
How do I reach you? How do we reach you?
If you visit our website, there are contacts that are there.
Okay.
And you can get in touch with any of our colleagues so that we can get you sorted out.
Okay. All right.
But
Thank you.
You can even text through WhatsApp.
Yeah. Okay.
0722.
All right. Yes.
0722.
Yes.
300-245.
Okay, that is Den's number.
Yes, you can WhatsApp.
Yes. Okay. All right. It's actually about the template that you're saying you do it in the afternoon, so it is all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
and have a good afternoon. See you.